Well, welcome everybody, and hope you've got your coffees next to you and you're ready to listen to the amazing panel that we have today. So the topic of automation gets touched upon a lot, and we talk about what it does, we talk about how helpful it can be, but the context of how to use it and supercharge your finance teams is something that is not widely covered. So we would like to take this opportunity today with our amazing panel and discover it in 3 different topics. So first, let's start with the introductions of the panel. My name is Irina, and I'm looking after partnerships here at Kolleno. So I work with Adam and from NoBlue and Tipalti, our great partners. And I've been with Kolleno for more than 2 years now. And basically, I've started in the customer success, so I do know a lot of our great stories of our clients as well. So we'll be very happy to add to the discussion. And I'll pass it on to Djibrane to introduce himself.
Thank you, Irina, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm very excited to be here with this esteemed panel. My name is Djibrane Larrabure. I am the CFO here at Kolleno. Have been with the firm for over 2 years in this exciting capacity. Previous to this, spent some time in the Big Four.
Fantastic. Adam, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Irina. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here today. My name is Adam Ladd, and I'm the Director of Account Management and Partnerships here at NoBlue2. I've spent the last 15 years or so, the entirety of my career working in the ERP industry, initially in the Microsoft space, before the last 10 years or so working for NetSuite themselves as one of the senior leaders in the account management organization, and recently moving over to ourselves at NoBlue, the largest NetSuite partner here in EMEA. So pleasure to be here. Thank you, Irina.
Thank you, Adam. And Martijn, to you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Irina and Adam, Djibrane. Great teaming up on this event today. So my name is Martijn. I'm the director for Tipalti within the EU region. So out of our Amsterdam office, we're slowly conquering Europe, one account at a time. Tipalti is the global market leader in the mid-market payables automation, and we're bringing that to Europe. My background is in SaaS and fintech. I've got a broad experience in bringing technologies to the European market. I'm very glad to be here with you today to discuss the challenges in enhancing the ERP.
Fantastic. Thank you. So what are the key topics we're going to be covering today? So introduction to solutions to enhance your ERP. We'll touch upon what's the right time, what are the challenges, and how to choose it. We'll explore automation for critical financial processes. What are these processes? And of course, provide real-world applications and examples. So without the further ado, I'm gonna dive into the questions. So I guess the most important question is, when is the right time to start considering enhancing your ERP? And I think, Adam, given your experience of working with so many companies across different industries, you're probably best placed to take this one.
Brilliant. Thank you, Irina. Well, I think the initial answer is a simple one. I think it's right away. I think it's so important for yourselves as customers or those that are going through an implementation period to make sure that the momentum is kept up post-implementation. As you're going through an implementation, or once you've delivered a NetSuite system, your business is continuing to evolve. It's continuing to change. Your challenges remain forthcoming and changing as well. And as an organization, you must adapt. And if we remain in the same state of play, on the same status quo as to what your NetSuite system was implemented like originally, we create what's called a value gap. And ultimately, this is where the distance between your implementation configuration and your ongoing business continues to broaden and widen. And ultimately, the longer that period goes on, the more out of date your configuration is. With NetSuite, there's 2 releases a year. Like most SaaS softwares, there's updates. So really, it's important to work closely with your partner. Embrace the implementation as a catalyst for change. and constantly be evaluating the processes and how you do them. Is it just the de facto approach, or is there room to improve? It's always seeing where there's a call to action, really. So I would encourage you to work with your NetSuite partner. Obviously, we're here at NoBlue2 for those of our customers, or for those of you that may be learning a little bit about us too. But I would encourage you to work with your partner to review your NetSuite system regularly. We offer quarterly business reviews in which we work closely with our customers to understand their business goals and objectives, and they're probably most importantly, their blockers to success at the moment, and how we can overcome some of those challenges to make sure you're really getting the most out of your existing NetSuite instance.
Thank you. And I think also one thing to maybe that I would like to cover is there a specific compelling event that could drive that change or make you consider like enhancing your ERP, and what could that be?
I think by nature of the type of organizations that tend to procure NetSuite and implement NetSuite, we're often talking about high scale growth organizations that want to grow rapidly and into new markets as well, particularly into the international scene, leveraging the NetSuite One World functionality. So if your organization is acquisitive by nature or growing beyond the current borders that you're working within, ultimately, those kind of milestone events are really important to make sure that the system you've got in place and configured at present is really adequate to help you on that growth journey.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. And by the way, to the audience, if you have any questions while we cover any topics, please feel free to type them into the chat or in the Q&A. We can take them as well along as we go with the questions here from the panel. So please don't be shy. If you have any questions, please submit them and we'll take them as we go along. So moving along to, in terms of fantastic. So now you're ready to consider and you started thinking about implementing or enhancing your ERP and implementing those different solutions that can make it better. Then what are the common challenges and how can they be overcome? And I think Djibrane, Martijn, I'll turn to you here, given everything that you've seen maybe from your perspective, what would those be?
Yeah, thanks, Irina. Happy to kick off here. I think that's a common question. For me, in my mind, there are really kind of three elements or three key areas where you often see challenges. I think it really revolves around, firstly, the planning, secondly, the execution, and thirdly, really around the adoption. So, some of the challenges we see, going up into the planning phase is just, I think a lot of organizations are really eager to jump in and to start implementation and get their hands dirty. But I think, taking the time to really take a step back, really understand, what are the clear goals and outcomes and what's the end in mind for our organization. I think that's invaluable. And so I would really encourage, organizations to do that, because we've often seen ones that have jumped in, find challenges downstream. And that's on the planning side. On the execution side, I would say just making sure that there's quality data and quality inputs that are going in when you're doing any kind of integration or anything like that. So making sure that you've actually got the quality data, you've got the resources in there, you really thought out your execution from end to end. And then I think the final common challenge I would say is really around adoption. These are large implementations. You really need to galvanize and get support across your leadership team, but even beyond your leadership team, down to the day-to-day users. You really need to get support across the organization, and I can't emphasize that enough. Without that, you're setting yourself up for a number of headaches downstream and challenges.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I could not agree more with what Djibrane is saying there. If there's a couple of things I want to add, there's basically two, and they're around the same topic, and that topic is on how the finance team, the role of the finance team has been developing over the past couple years or maybe even decades, where you see that from pure accounting team, we're now taking much more strategic initiatives on within this finance team. We've done our own research where it was identified that more and more of the organizations do realize that the finance team is there to guide and direct the organization and play a much more active role in the strategic execution. And with that, there's two things that play a big role here. And the first one is that is about the position of the ERP within the finance organization. I saw on LinkedIn earlier this week someone that made the comparison between implementing an ERP and an open heart surgery. It's something that you definitely do not want to go for unless it's really needed. But it says a bit about the status of an ERP, the finance system within that organization. There's still the mindset that the accounting system should be capable of supporting all of the business functions of the finance organization. However, as that has been broadening, that's no longer the case anymore. And what you see in reality is that a lot of organizations are still leaning back or reverting back to our old favorite Excel sheets to get stuff done, which obviously is a band-aid on a larger solution that is not, that doesn't work anymore as long as at the moment you start to operate at a larger scale. So again, right, we try to step away from these band-aids because the accounting system itself is falling short or too cumbersome to work with for some less technical or less finance-inspired people. The second element there is that, and this touches a bit on Djibrane's last point, is the adoption and the reduction of manual tasks by the system that has to be accepted by the user. But the user now, because the finance team is spreading its wings into different departments, is a much broader persona or profile than we've seen before. So they might not have that finance experience. They might not have experience in working with an accounting system. So for an actual enhancement or the ERP to move forward, you need to make sure that whatever you're offering or whatever change you want to go through is also going to be accepted and adopted by those non-finance users that will be in scope, right? A quick example would be like, hey, if you're now changing your PO process for anyone in the organization to raise and start purchasing on their own behalf, you need to find a system that works. You need to find a system where, again, right, you also don't want everyone to pay up with their own NetSuite license fees for that. So identifying and preparing the rest of the organization and having them involved in that decision-making before you make a move like this is another element that's very crucial and potentially a pitfall that we see with some of the processes and customers that we work.
Sure. Adam, I don't know, you've unmuted yourself, so I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, I think it's just about choosing the right solution for your needs. I think, from my point of view, it's making sure that you work closely with your account manager. The chances are that they've gone through this process before, and you don't need to go alone in this journey. It is always daunting when you're going through a selection process. In terms of there's lots of choice in the marketplace. Is it you try to keep it as part of NetSuite as possible? Is it looking to best of breed solutions outside of NetSuite like Kolleno, like Tipalti? But making sure that you get advice from your partner, making sure that you're getting their insight, because they've done this many times before, and making sure that, to the idea of what the team had said about, really making sure that we're getting the adoption. That starts from the start of the project. Making sure that you're engaging with your frontline workers, your NetSuite users that are using the software day to day, hearing their pain points, what's good, what's bad, and making sure that cascades all the way through the organization. Hearing what the challenges are for executives. They're going to be different to what the NetSuite users day to day are like, and making sure that you capture all those requirements, because they'll all have different metrics that they're working to in terms of their roles, and making sure they have visibility of their performance to either of their individual roles or as the business as a whole. So making sure that adoption comes from the start, so that everyone feels like they're going through the journey together and getting something out of it, which is so vital to making sure that people really end up enjoying using the software and getting the benefit of making their day-to-day lives a little bit easier too.
And they're making the most of that, right? So the ROI on it, you can't just buy and not use it. Otherwise, what's the point of it? You've just spent money and that's it. No, thank you very much. I think in summary, before we move on to the next topic, when is the right time to start looking at it? As Adam was saying, straight away. And of course, if you're a company that likes to buy businesses, acquire businesses, merge with other businesses, then it's also a great point of you starting to think of how you can enhance your ERP. You need great planning. You need to make sure you've got the internal support. You've got the support not just from the management, but also from the users, so you can have full adoption. And when you're looking to choose the right software, go to your account managers, go to the people who've helped you before, and they're the experts. They can identify the pains probably even quicker than you can, and they can help you on that way. Amazing. I can't see any questions from the panel yet, from the attendees yet for the panel. So we're gonna move on to the next part of our discussion. So exploring automation for critical financial processes. And I think here I would like to start with identifying which financial processes benefit the most from automation and why. And maybe from my side, to set the scene a little bit, is that, you know, finance teams function across so many departments in the organization that it could be anything from payroll automation to payables automation to AR automation, it's reconciliation. There's so many aspects to touch upon. So I would love to hear from all of you three your thoughts on which processes benefit the most from automation and why.
Yeah, I think that's, maybe I can kickstart us off. I think that's a great question, Irina. I think, as you said, it can really cut across a number of different processes, and that's what, you know, I've seen. And when I'm talking to other finance leaders, you know, that's really top of mind. I think one thing that's really key or top of mind for a number of finance leaders is, you know, really around like cash flow. How do we, you know, make sure that our cash flow, how do we stay on top of that, you know, especially in these times? And so, you know, in our case at Kolleno, for example, you know, we help support them in automation from, you know, the invoice to cash process. And a lot of the pain points that you'll often hear from CFOs and finance directors is, you know, I've got a number of different resources that are chasing out late payments. They're doing things manually. They're pulling things from Excel, from disparate systems. You know, we're trying to stay on top of that. We're trying to stay on top of our cash flow, but it's become really difficult. And so, you know, as we're working with them to go through and think through, you know, how they can automate their workflows and do those elements, you know, we start to really get an understanding of their needs, what it is that they're trying to achieve, et cetera. So, you know, I think that's one area, is really around, you know, how we can better manage our accounts receivables and kind of invoice to cash process. And I think, you know, key to that is really, you know, helping them to automate their workflows so that their teams can save time, you know, and really focus on what matters. Because one thing I think we'll notice, you know, in the last few years is that the role of the finance team has really shifted. You know, whereas before it was, you know, much more kind of internal focused. You know, right now, I would say it's expanded much more both internally across the organization and has become a lot more external facing. And so, you know, helping to automate processes like that, where you can help to automate workflows, you know, help them with their invoicing process, their payment process, their reconciliation process, help to save time on those key elements, allows, you know, CFOs and their teams to really focus on, you know, the future trajectory of the business and the growth objectives of the business more broadly.
Djibrane, you may enjoy that. I had a customer the other day that said to me that finance used to be a thorn in their side. Now they're actually one of their best friends because they make it so much easier. And I'm not sure if they've joined today's call, but it did make me chuckle, because just that shift, as you say, over the last couple of years has been so notable.
Oh, certainly. That's great to hear.
Yeah, I think similar to what Djibrane is seeing on the receivable side, that invoice to cash process. We see that on the whole P2P process, right? Procure to pay. There's a dozen of manual tasks in there, whether that's pushing back and forth with your vendors on, hey, I need to get the right data, the right bank account, the right VAT ID in, to processing these invoices manually, to actually paying out on all these invoices through your bank or bank integration that might not support multi-currency, multi-payment method, etc. So there's a lot of efficiency gains there, which do not only make that process much more smooth, but it also frees up resources within your finance department to spend on that more strategic initiatives that they want to be working on and that we see that organizations are shifting towards. So on the efficiency side, there's a big gain by automating some of those processes in the AP process, if thought well through from, again, right, from the procure to the actual payment and reconciliation part of the flow. In addition to that, we see that that's specifically the case if organizations are trying to go internationally and go abroad, right? The more currencies, the more different tax legislations, the more payment method, the more different languages the invoices come in with, the more complex it gets. It gets very complex very quickly, and therefore there's big efficiency gains to find there. On top of that, other than the efficiency gains, there's also a big role for automation to help organizations get their costs under control. Obviously, on the AP side, that's where the funds go out. That's where you have to be very careful that no errors are made and that you're actually transferring the right amount to the right person rather than becoming a leaking bucket. And again, right, the more manual tasks you get out of that, the more you automate in one larger flow, the less room there is for any human errors. And therefore, you can save a lot on any maverick rogue spend that would otherwise occur. So those are the two elements, I think, within the AP process where automation can play a big role and can provide the biggest benefits.
Awesome.
I think just one thing to add, if I may, Martijn touched earlier around, the idea of open heart surgery for ERP and how painful that can be, trying to unpick things when you're further down the line as an organization in maturity. One of the analogy that I would kind of tend to use here is almost the idea of dressing for the job that you wish to have. Making sure that you have your tech stack in place up front to enable that scale, enable that growth, really from the outset. Trying to implement systems when you're working at velocity and you're working at scale is so much more challenging. And you can get to your goals quicker by doing it up front, and then having the right application in places will just remove some of that frustration and friction that will come trying to almost put the brakes on to a certain extent as you go through the process later on. So trying to address that is really important. No,
I totally agree with all of that. And I think given where you are from different positions and different company perspectives, it will be great to understand what are the latest trends in the financial process automation. So what are the technologies that you see upcoming, how people are utilizing automation, and how it's helping with the day-to-day?
It took us more than 20 minutes to touch on the word AI, Irina, which I think is a record in these days. So well done keeping that in the bag until now. I'll let the others reply first. I have my own thoughts on this, but we'll definitely touch on AI.
And I love that you mentioned that, because that's exactly what I was going to touch on right now. I think that's definitely a key area of interest, especially within the finance teams. I think a lot of the organizations that we're really talking to are interested in how AI and machine learning can really impact and help finance teams. And I think generative AI has just added this new layer, right? So just in conversations with teams, just hearing how they're trying to explore how AI and machine learning, for example, can help them with forecasting, right? Getting all of your data from your ERP, using AI and machine learning to help pull some of that data, and then layering in, generative AI, for example, to help with the commentary and helping the framing and reporting of those kind of key elements. In the AR space, for example, on credit policies, being able to pull, from your ERP and your systems to really understand, the payment behaviors, right, of each of your clients, trying to really help to inform, how you can adjust your credit policies to that, and then layering in Gen AI to really help with the communications of that, right, and then help balance out the communications. And I think that touches on the external facing portion of the finance role, is you're now interacting much more with clients. And so being able to use things like, chat bots or other elements with Gen AI to be able to improve that client experience when they have, questions on finance, how much they owe, their receivables, payables, etc., I think is key. And so I think those are the areas that I'm at least keenly watching. I know we're keenly watching as an organization, but the landscape is evolving quickly.
Thank you, Djibrane.
Yeah, it's similar to what Djibrane's saying. Like, I think there's a lot of things that are from a machine learning AI perspective, and at Tipalti, this has been a big focus for us for the last couple of years already. There's a couple of things that are already very much in place in solutions like our own, where we just leverage the machine learning for things like auto coding, rule setting, approval flows, by having the machine understand, like, oh, if this invoice is coming from supplier B, that probably tells me that this number on the bottom left, that's typically a VAT number. So I can automate and move forward there, or I can read that actual text, and based on historical data, map that or auto code that into my NetSuite or other finance system environment. But probably more impactful right now is like that the newer technology on the AI front, where we look at large language models, and they can be used for analyzing existing finance data or listen to instructions from users. So there's a couple of different things that helps give you a lot of additional insights and overview that are very actionable. And as an example, you could obviously have them analyze any of the invoices that came in, or any of the outgoing payments, what supplier spends most, where, when, and with that, start predicting or start forecasting on what's coming next for you as a finance organization. But also from a user friendliness perspective and ease of use, it would allow your users, but also your customers, your vendors, anyone that is a stakeholder in process, to just ask questions, right? As if I'm in a treasury department, I would, for instance, love to understand, out of my suppliers, which 10 suppliers are typically paying out the slowest, for instance, or what is the key reason, the most common reason that people send invoices back for corrections. Like questions like that, if the database is there and you've got the smart, the large language model running on it, you can identify a lot of additional information in literally a couple split seconds, where previously you would be having people look through Excel sheets, drafts, or not even get the time to do so. So that's literally a game changer in this industry, where we see that you can get things going so much quicker and so much easier to actually get done by any user, whether that's someone with a strong finance experience or someone that does not have any data analytics skills at all, to actually get the insights that they're looking for, specifically tailored to them.
Awesome. Adam, do you have anything to add on this one?
I think the only thing I'd say is, we hear a lot about machine learning, generative AI, and people are, there might be some trepidation about getting into that space. Of what does that mean for you, and what does that mean for your business? But companies are moving to this and adopting this, and I think we've got a number of mutual customers in this room that are taking advantage of this and seeing the benefits of it too. Realistically speaking, those customers that are getting ahead of the curve with these technologies are the ones that are going to benefit from the most, and continue their growth trajectories at the fastest rate. So if it's something that perhaps is a little bit daunting for now, I would suggest don't be scared, lean in, engage with it, and really try to take advantage of it for your organization, because there are other organizations that are doing it, and want to make sure you're staying up competitive with those businesses around you offering similar sort of solutions.
Fantastic, thank you. I think in summary, probably I would summarize and say that straight away, if you're going from Excel sheet straight into AI, maybe it's not the best solution, but start going to simple automation and automating as much as you can, and then add in the elements of AI and generative AI and everything else, because at that point you're taking the steps to get better and better in your processes. So at this point, once you figure it out how to do the automation, AI will come naturally, and you don't have to have this big gap. So I guess you have the automation, let's say you have adopting AI, and we get in a very interesting topic of how can you ensure that your data security and compliance is great, is on par with what is required when you put in the automation in your financial processes?
I think that's a great question. I think that's top of mind for me, especially given a lot of the sensitive financial information that I deal with, and I know that other finance teams deal with. I think that's critical. One key thing that we've done as an organization, Kolleno, is we pursued the ISO 27001. So we attain that, and we follow that, closely. And I think this is top of mind when I'm talking to, my colleagues in other industries as well. How do we protect our information? How do we make sure that everything is secure? And there's a few different elements, that I often kind of ask or talk to leaders about, as they think through this process. The first is just making sure that you have the right policies and procedures in place, to really make sure that you're protecting your information. I think one example is just around like access controls, for example, just making sure that you have, within your team, clear delineation of like who has access to what information, how that works, and you have those processes in place within your organization to make sure that, unauthorized personnel don't really have access to any sensitive information. I think the second thing is really around like encryption, just making sure that you're protecting a lot of sensitive information. We deal with payroll, we deal with a lot of personal information, internally. And so trying to make sure that, we have those processes in place. And, I think there's a number of different elements, that people will talk through in terms of like security infrastructure and things like that. But I think there's two areas that often get overlooked, that I often, try to emphasize whenever, I'm having these conversations. I think the first is really around just making sure that you have the right training in place, because it all starts, it's top to bottom, side to side, across the team. Everything is really around making sure that everyone is informed and everyone understands the importance of, information security. What does that mean for your organization, right? What are the policies that you have in place, right? What are the key elements that they need to think about, that they need to adhere to, to make sure that you're protecting the information for your clients, etc. And I think that goes both from the employee side, but also from vendors. One thing is also making sure that any third-party vendors, consultants, etc., really get an understanding of, how critical that is to your organization and how they can help support your organization in those objectives. So, that's one area, is really around the training element, especially for team members, across the organization, for vendors. And then I think the second thing is just making sure that everything doesn't stay static. We just touched on AI and how things are changing in the cybersecurity and the security realm. It's changing, just as fast paced. And so really having in processes and policies in place to make sure that you're continuously monitoring how that landscape is changing, how you can evolve and how you can put in place, and continue to strengthen your own security protocols. That's something we've done, internally very closely with our CTO, and something, certainly that's top of mind for a number of clients and others that we talk to as well.
Thanks, Djibrane. Martijn, anything from your side?
Yeah, I think I always think this is a little bit of a broader subject, right? Because other than the certifications and the audits, where a lot of companies that we work with, and we work a lot with like faster growing software and technology companies, is that when they need to go through fundraising, they need to get their requirements set right on this, right? Otherwise, the VCs are probably going to tell no to them. So we see that's usually a trigger for them to start getting more controls in place. And a place where they typically start, because again, this is where you can lose a lot of money, is the payments environment. This is where your funds go out. This is also where you can easily damage your business if you do not have the right controls in place. So there's a lot of things, and again, preaching my own storyline here, but there's a lot of things where Tipalti can support with. But is also very much on the mind here when we're trying to find that control and de-risking the finance organization as an operation itself. That starts with ensuring that your setup is all secure. There's audit trails, there's approval flow, there's the right user rights, etc. But it's also very much towards the vendor on having an engine to vet that the information that they put in is right, and that there's a decent supplier risk management part where you identify which suppliers are more dangerous to work with than others. So there's a lot of different elements there, but that payments piece is where we see a lot of companies that we work with start, because it's the one area where it could be very, very costly if you do not have the controls right, set in the right way.
Awesome, thank you, Martijn. So I think I don't see any questions on this topic, so we're going to move on. And now we're going to get into the more interesting realm of providing real world applications and examples. So can you share stories of businesses that have successfully automated their financial processes? And I'm going to kick that one off, given my previous hat as a CES just a couple of years back. So we've implemented Kolleno, and we helped to discover the process for actually our common client with Tipalti, DNA payments. So when we first met them, they've just acquired several businesses, growing very quickly. And it's actually kind of coming back to Adam's point. If you're an acquisitive company, you do need to think about your processes pretty quickly, and you need to make sure everything's aligned. So when we first started speaking to DNA payments, their invoice to cash process was a little bit segmented in the sense of that every different business unit was doing their own thing. There was no centralized information. There were spreadsheets that they had to work off. And where Kolleno came in, and it was for us quite a long-term project. We almost took, I think, 9 months to get them to the point where they're fully automated with NetSuite, because they started with a CSV. Then they moved on to actually getting that NetSuite connection with all of their billing engines and getting that actual invoice into NetSuite. So making sure that NetSuite is the source of truth for them for their sales ledger. And once we've done that, we were able to help them automate all of their workflows for any type of customer. And whether it's mid-market, whether it's enterprise, they could basically automate all of the external outreach, including SMS, email, and generate the tasks for their credit controller. So they didn't have to kind of, download the ledger and say, well, this top 20 clients owe me the most, I'm going to go after them first. Whereas this was more like, okay, everybody's getting reminders. Everybody has a point of access to where they can pay, because Kolleno combines all these different payment providers across card, direct debit, open banking. And the one thing we did together as well with DNA payments is put them onto the Go cardless and made sure that this whole process from invoice being issued, then invoice being charged automatically via Go cardless, and then reconciled back into NetSuite. So now you're suddenly not just making the job of a credit controller easier, you're making the job of the financial controller easier, that they don't have to sit there and look at all the payouts from Go cardless and just understand which invoice was paid. Imagine if you're issuing 4,000 invoices per month. You can't do that manually. You have to automate that. So that's where Kolleno helped DNA payments and what we've done for them. Equally, this process kind of started from the top down, and the buy-in we had was from one of the co-founders, and then it was the buy-in from the COO, who actually looks after the collections, and their amazing AI manager, Jordan. He was incredible in pushing that internally and making sure that there is that user adoption, because without the user adoption, it doesn't matter what the co-founder or the COO wants to do. If the people are not using and automating, it's kind of useless. So that's kind of the real life example. And Martijn, I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks a lot. And I think for me, it's the same case. With DNA payment, you already mentioned the shared client amongst us. But I'm going to talk a bit about the AP side. And I think this also showcases that automation is there on all the different fronts within that finance organization, and that there's big steps or leaps to make for a lot of organization. But in the case of DNA payments specifically, they were also bringing a lot of international entities together under one umbrella into one finance operation. And that brought a lot of additional, as much as that wasn't, the aim was to make it more efficient, that brought a lot of additional challenges too. One of that being on the supplier onboarding front, where they had to onboard suppliers from different regions that required different IDs and different information. And there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of ping-ponging, if you will, between the finance team and the suppliers that they were working with, which, again, right, not only is that taking a lot of time, both from getting things done and getting suppliers set up as internally in terms of working hours for the team. But it also leads to a bad supplier experience where you feel like, come on, I just want to just do business, just pay me up. Let's go. Let's get moving, and try to avoid that. That's where they eventually leverage Tipalti to make that happen. And the second element was on the invoice processing side, where similarly they were doing a lot of stuff on that manually, coding it manually into the ERP system. Again, they have a variety of suppliers, a lot of different countries, a lot of different currencies to pay out in. And this was honestly making it a pain in the ass for them. And the reality was that they had a team of 5 talented finance professionals who were working on these processes, the invoices, and the suppliers itself. And again, this is the talk track that we used before. Now that they've automated that flow, they have these 5 talented finance professionals ready to support the business, to work on actual strategic initiatives. Not only helps that the company with 5 people that are now adding value rather than wasting their valuable time on coding in invoices or chasing suppliers, but it also massively helped them with talent retention, right? It's a very common use case that we see with some of the customers that we work with, that before automation kicked in, specifically looking at the persona and the profile of the nowadays finance professional, they don't want to deal with invoices. They don't want to deal with typing over information from one system into the other. And you see that it really helps getting automation in place. Having them to work on more exciting projects helps for the retention, and with that also, the overall employee satisfaction and the growth of the business for the customer.
Yeah, I'm sure, Djibrane, you could say that the Paula from finance is definitely happy with the Tipalti. She can just send the invoice and it goes in there.
Certainly.
Fantastic. And I think as we kind of wrap up the discussion, what are the key lessons learned from implementing automation in finance teams? And I think that's a question to all 3 of you, and I'll chip in at the end. But it will be great to hear your thoughts.
I think
that's a great question.
Sorry, Djibrane, I was just thinking that I think the one that for me that really stood out is your story of DNA payments. There is a classic example of making sure that you're getting folks within the organization, kind of super users, champions of change, really. Taking your example of Jordan as the AR manager that was super on board to be the head, the linchpin for that change, at all different levels, making sure you have stakeholders both from a user perspective as a super user and leading the charge for their peers, as well as someone that wants to adopt and embrace the new technology, all the way through to your senior leadership. It's so vital because if there's any cog in that machine that isn't on board, then it just the whole operation will falter. And I think setting the expectation that we're doing this from the outset, within the business from leadership, but cascading down, prevents inertia in projects. It prevents them stalling. Things get delivered on time and on budget, and then everyone has a much more simple day-to-day operations in a finance team, which I think is ultimately the purpose of solutions like Kolleno, solutions like Tipalti as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Adam said. I think that engagement is key, early up front. And I think going back to some of my kind of, I guess at the beginning of this, or touched on some of those key pieces, I think when I think through like the planning and execution phase, I think those are kind of 2 key learnings for me as well. Is I'd really encourage organizations that are looking at this, to really take the time up front to do some careful thinking and have that end in mind mindset. Like, what are some of our goals? What are it that we're trying to achieve? What does the ideal outcome look like? And then start working from there and take a little bit of time to think through that process. And then I think from an execution standpoint, as you're talking through and going through the process, is really take the time up front to make sure that the data that you have is there and going through and making sure that you have the quality of that data. Because it goes back to, garbage in, garbage out, right? You can go through the implementations and go through the process, but if there isn't, if you haven't taken the time to actually go through your information, go through your data and make sure that there's quality there, then ultimately that's going to impact you downstream in immeasurable ways. So I would say take the time up front.
Awesome. Thanks, Djibrane. Martin?
Yeah, I fully agree with Djibrane there, right? Look at the bigger picture and try to think one move ahead. Again, the finance process has evolved into a much broader shared responsibility that goes way beyond the initial finance team. So you need to think about that adoption. Again, I talked about this before, but what happens if the announcement is made? Are people going to use it? How is this going to impact not only the finance people's work, but also the people that are in other departments surrounding the finance department? And secondly, on that, by zooming out and focusing on that bigger picture, as Djibrane says, think about that next move. If you see an opportunity, it's like, oh, hey, we can automate a piece here. Let's bring an additional tool in. What does that mean for your overall stack, right? Are you actually solving a problem, or are you solving a problem but creating a new one by getting something getting something on board that now needs to integrate with something else, and you create, again, right, that Franken-suite of a finance machine that you can never pull apart anymore, that you can never modify anymore, because every single piece of it is integrated with some other piece. Like having that overall view on, like, looking at, as Djibrane said very rightfully, like looking at that end state, where do we want to be? What is the actual dream here? Rather than rushing into pushing band-aids on somewhat broken processes is key, because otherwise you're only doing yourself bringing yourself into a disadvantage by creating an IT sprawl solution within your finance team that no one's looking.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that kind of all summarizes, and to me, with my finance hat on, it all comes down to, you need to have successful implementation, because you need to get that ROI on what you're putting the investment in, right? You can't, if it doesn't go well, if your users are not adopting, and if you've got a bad data, as Djibrane was saying, the ROI on your investment is just not going to be there. And what's going to happen that in whatever 12 months time, when it comes to renewal, you don't want to buy it again. And at this point, it's just a waste of your time, a waste of your team's time, and you don't want to be there. So unless you have those kind of three key elements together, is it actually the right time for you to even get that software or that piece of automation, is for you to assess. And I think that's where I would like to leave the audience with, that as much as you can have the compelling event, you need to be ready to implement that project and get on with it. Awesome. On this note, I don't know if there are any questions from the audience. Kind of the key things for after the webinar, you will receive recording via the email. So for those who have attended, and if you had to be distracted by that email or something else, don't worry, you can always re-listen. If you want to ask any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn or via email. And of course, if you're really interested in one of our softwares or in Adam's services, please book a demo. We're always available here, and I'm going to give it another minute if there are any questions. Oh, there is one. In terms of implementing ERPs, you compared it to heart surgeries. What are companies now doing to streamline this process? Right. Who wants to take that?
That should be all Adam, right? Or not?
I think the most important thing is the planning, as we came back earlier in the conversation, is really trying to get ahead of the curve and to understand what a roadmap looks like for your organization for the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months, so that ultimately you're working with a trusted partner like a NoBlue, like a NetSuite, to make sure that you've ultimately got foresight of what your business is going to require, and really trying to anticipate the needs of the organization, be planned, as opposed to getting to a critical mass where it has to be open heart surgery. Perhaps it could be something to just relieve the blood pressure as opposed to full open heart surgery. We have the ability to work closely, do things like customer health checks, understand your business ambitions and challenges and goals, and then work closely with our customers to give an idea of a roadmap and an insight as how you can achieve such growth, development, configuration, whatever the case may be, down the line.
Okay. How about for transition from one ERP to another? Any tips? Oh, that's to me like not even open heart surgery. That's like hip replacement on both of your hips, you know?
Well, I think the most important with this one is to really understand why you need to be transitioning in the first place. What is it about your existing ERP solution at present that's basically stunting your growth, that is a blocker, is an enabler, and then making sure that when you're going through that evaluation period, you're keeping the pain points of the business at the moment right at the forefront of your mind. I think it's important to evaluate, you engage with different parts of the organization. We've touched on, the finance function today, but depending on what your organization looks like, making sure that when you take the next step, that it actually caters to everyone's needs in the organization wherever possible, rather than perhaps within just the finance sphere as well, because solutions like NetSuite are so all-encompassing and have solutions like e-commerce, they've got CRM, billing options. There are different parts of the organization that perhaps when going through an ERP cycle, people can quite often just pigeonhole it as a finance solution, when solutions like NetSuite offer so much, and you might actually be able to save taking on a separate CRM tool, for example, or maybe save money decommissioning one and bringing functionality into NetSuite too.
Gotcha. Understand. Right, a very interesting one. AI, friend or foe?
I'm not taking that one.
I'll take it. Don't worry. I think it's a great question. I think the answer is not as easy as the question itself might be. But I think if treating sensibly, if taking things step by step, 100% for finance organizations, AI is your friend. You're gonna benefit big time from the capabilities that have been opening up and will be opening up in the next couple of months, years yet to come. On the longer term, who knows? We'll see. But at the current state for finance teams, friend, 100%.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I would say it is more of a friend. Of course, it depends on how you use it, but I would agree it's a friend. Well, I don't see any more questions, so it's been a pleasure having you all. Adam, Martijn, Djibrane, thank you very much for giving us your time and your knowledge and sharing it all with us. And for everyone who's attended, again, hope you enjoyed it and that cup of coffee helped you to get through it and you found it useful and informative. Again, as I mentioned before, email will come to you with the recording. Any questions, connect via LinkedIn. And if you're really keen, then book a demo. Oh, and as I was wrapping up, last one came up. As a CFO, what would you say is the best way to track ROI on automation? I think you have a session coming up on that, Djibrane, very soon.
Yeah, we do have a session coming up actually in just a few weeks. So I think, the ROI on automation, I think I would take a step back and think through clearly around that end in mind, right? So ultimately, when you're going through and you're trying to evaluate, what is it that you're ultimately trying to achieve, right? Once you actually have that end in mind and you actually put in the plan, then you can actually evaluate what the ROI is. I'd also say, and this is a point that you touched on, earlier on, Irina, which is, it's very much a journey. I think oftentimes what happens is, finance teams, especially we're eager to implement and see, an immediate, ROI. But what I'll also say is it's also a journey. So, the return, you will see some immediate returns, but, as you go longer term, with that end in mind, you'll start to see, how you're building up your tech stack and all of those different pieces and really be able to track your ROI kind of more holistically. So I would say when you're thinking about the ROI, start with the end in mind to really understand what types of returns you're looking at, and then also thinking of it through as a journey so that you can kind of more clearly track through.
Amazing. Thank you. And again, wrapping up, thanks. See you in the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks
you,
a lot for
everyone.
hosting, Irina. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Irina. Bye now.